Good afternoon and welcome to July's Solventum CDI Innovation Webinar. We welcome you all here and appreciate you joining us today. Before we get started with our panel discussion, I just want to go over a couple housekeeping items. We're utilizing the On24 platform that is web-based, so there is no dial-in number. So if you do experience any audio or technical issues, typically doing a quick refresh of your browser will take care of any of those issues. There are several sections that you can see. We have the media player, which is actually going to be where we're going to be living mostly today. So if you want, you can certainly minimize the presentation area because this is a panel discussion. So you get to see our bright and smiling faces of our panelists. You can make that media player larger. And in that media player, we do also offer closed captioning. We do have a resources section that has a few pertinent things for today. Again, because there is no presentation, there's nothing to download, but there is a certificate of attendance. There are not CEUs that we offer for today, but you can take that certificate of attendance and submit it to an accredited association. We encourage you to ask questions. We'll get to as many as we can, and you can do that in the Q&A box. And then lastly, we always appreciate to know how we did. So feel free at the end of the presentation to complete that survey. So again, we have a great group of panelists today from our own internal subject matter experts, and then we have Kathy Harkness as our moderator. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Kathy as we explore Solventum experts' frequently asked CDI questions. Kathy?
Thank you, Lisa. I'm Kathy Harkness. I am a CDI nurse. My role at Solventum is I am a CDI sales product specialist. And today I'm going to be your moderator with today's questions. We received more questions than we will definitely have time to cover today. So today we're focusing specifically on those things around CDI related to 360 Encompass for CDI and CDI Engage 1. Questions on other topics may be, or we hope to address in future sessions. We'll try to leave a little room today for live Q&A at the end, so please drop your questions in the chat pane as Lisa described. Well, with that, let's dive in. Our first product specialist, subject matter expert is Hannah Feinberg. She's going to address the number of questions we had about prioritization for 360 Encompass CDI specifically. So Hannah, if you'll turn your camera on and introduce yourself, and I'm going to give you the first question, and that is, why use prioritization instead of reviewing everything?
Sure, Kathy, that's a great question. As Kathy mentioned, my name is Hannah Feinberg, and I'm the CDI Clinical Solutions Platform Advisor here at Solventum. And that is typically a question that we get quite often for organizations and CDI teams that actually have 100% review coverage rate. So if you're able to review everything, why does it help to prioritize cases if you can get to everything anyways? And the answer to that is that your coverage rate really covers new reviews, but your prioritization will actually help you ensure that you're getting to all the concurrent re-reviews appropriately, and you're making sure that you're doing your re-reviews and that they're focused on things that actually have opportunities for reviews and opportunities to make an impact, as opposed to routinely just setting up re-reviews every 2 days, and whatever you get to, you get to. Prioritization really helps bring those cases to the top that you need to focus on for those re-reviews.
Well, you mentioned, the coverage rate. So unfortunately, sometimes our customers are very surprised when their team's coverage rate actually trends downward after implementing prioritization. Why does that happen?
So it's actually a good indicator usually of that there's a shift in prioritization, and possibly even that prioritization is being used appropriately. There's a shift in mentality that really has to occur with implementation of prioritization. We kind of leave the traditional focus behind of doing, a certain number of new cases and a certain number of re-reviews each day. Really, again, going back to that first question, really we're trying to focus on ensuring that the time spent reviewing cases are on cases that have the highest opportunities to make an impact and make a change, and to improve documentation quality as well as financial and all the different indicators and things that CDI team members are responsible for now. So if we focus on making sure we get to every single case, regardless of whether the case has an opportunity, we're kind of wasting our time. And the real focus of CDI teams nowadays, especially with, teams are being asked to do more with less, and less, either less resources, less time, more higher visit volumes, different things, as well as expanding what the scope of what CDI team members are expected to review. You really want to prioritize the cases to the cases that have opportunities for review. So it more matters not the amount of cases that you're reviewing, but the quality of your reviews and what the outcomes of the reviews are. So the shift of, from that review rate, coverage rate focus to really focusing on the query rate, the pre-discharge query rate, as well as financial impact, your SOI and ROM impacts, et cetera. Those things are really much more key in terms of identifying a successful program.
Yeah, I think that most of us who've been in CDI a little while have really taken those metrics, those key standard metrics, into us. And it's hard to let go of that, right? Because we're very conditioned. Should there be a standard number of new reviews versus re-reviews, prioritization, all of that, type of thing? I think you did address that for sure, but is there anything else around, how do we take what Actis and AHIMA and, has given us, and it's really been a while since they've produced those standards, but we know it's shifting, and how do we kind of mitigate those customers that feel like, well, if I'm not doing 6 to 8 new reviews a day, and I'm not doing 10 to 12 re-reviews, how do I handle those kind of conversations?
Yeah, so it really is, it's a real shift in approach and mentality when you move to prioritization. And it's not even about moving to prioritization. It's really a shift in mentality in terms of the health of a CDI program. It's really looking at those key performance indicators, which are more around your quality metrics and more around your financial impact, as well as your severity and risk of mortality targets and hacks and PSIs, and those types of things are much more indicative of a healthy CDI program versus just being able to hit target numbers of reviews and re-reviews. So it's not just a shift within the department, it's also a shift of leadership's understanding of the focus of what you're really trying to accomplish. So, and ultimately that really is what they want. They really are not interested in, the productivity number of how many you're able to churn out, but really what does that mean for the health of the CDI program as well as the health of the whole organization. And it's really looking at those key performance indicators and taking a look and seeing what those are and what really matters to the organization. And those are the things that should really be the metrics that are looked at month over month versus the productivity metric of reviews, re-reviews. If they're not meaningful reviews, the metric does not really matter.
Yes. I love that meaningful work as opposed to being task-oriented and just checking box. No, because the meaningful work is what moves those levers. So another question that our viewers, people had sent to us was, do you recommend that CDI look over a list for missing CCMCCs or do we trust the system?
So we definitely recommend trusting the system. The system is a multi-pronged system that has multiple factors that will prioritize cases. So sometimes your organization may have made a decision that something else may be a higher priority to look over certain DRGs, certain focus DRGs. certain DRGs that are over length of stay, things like that may actually have a higher impactful review than just looking for cases without CCs and MCCs. And the factor of, regarding CCs or MCCs or absence of CCs or MCCs is actually a factor within the prioritization tool. So we would want that to be looked at in a holistic approach based on everything that's going on within your prioritization tool, because it's not just about CCs and MCCs. It's about, again, that whole holistic approach of opportunities and quality documentation, and it's not just about getting that CC and MCC. And prioritization really allows that because, again, it's so many facets to those scores and those factors that come together and compound to bring cases up to the top.
Yeah. So when you're talking about priority, this next question is really about, what are the recommendations for optimizing priority score? And we do have a couple of things in the chat that are addressing those types of, how I think it's more about optimizing, but also, can you talk about a little bit about maintaining it too?
Yeah, so I think there's this, a desire, a lot of, a turnkey type of system. Certainly, everybody's busy. IT teams are busy, and certainly directors, leaders are very busy. And turnkey approach is one approach and one aspect. And we definitely recommend beginning with that those default scores and that just plug and play kind of thing. However, as every organization has different priorities and every organization has different case mixes, and they see different trends in patients and varieties of cases and varieties of surgical procedures and all kinds of things that may require personalization with the prioritization. So we would love to say, hey, it's, just plug and play, one and done. But really prioritization, to optimize prioritization is really looking at all those factors together and not in a silo, but really looking at all of them in totality and really determining what your organization's priorities are and adjusting scores for that. We also definitely recommend that that prioritization is something that is kind of fluid. It doesn't really, it's not stagnant. So the hope is that with prioritization that, your base scores kind of stay the same, but as things change or, your organization changes, new surgical procedures are brought in, certain physicians start to do certain medical things that weren't done before. You're attracting different types of cases and things like that, or you're bringing in, for example, a stroke program, and you want to look at all your stroke patients. Those are all things that you really want to be able to tweak and adjust from a prioritization perspective. So a really healthy program really does optimizes the scores that initial time and takes that time to foundationally adjust the scores to the way the organization, has their priorities. However, a really healthy program will go back in and readjust those scores about every 6 months, or if there's something specific that's going on within the organization, or there's certain data that comes back from certain reporting agencies and quality initiatives, then you go back into those scores and you adjust those scores based on those factors. And again, not just one factor, but kind of looking at the whole program holistically of how we can ensure that the cases with the highest impact for your specific organization are really coming to the top.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Hannah. Stay tuned. We're going to probably have more questions for you during the live Q&A, but we're going to move on to a related topic. We also received questions around about our CDI Engage 1 evidence sheets. And Caitlin Crowther is here with us to address those. Caitlin, can you introduce yourself and then expand a little bit more on how do evidence sheets work within 360 Encompass and how those are related to those priority factors that Hannah was talking about and overall prioritization?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Caitlin Crowther. I'm one of the product managers over inpatient CDI here at Solventum, and I primarily focus on CDI Engage One offering. So I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about our CDI Engage One evidence sheets. The CDI Engage One evidence sheets provide clinical opportunities for the CDI specialist to review by applying natural language understanding over the encounter documentation and pulling out pertinent clinical evidence. This is a separate application and engine from the CAC functionality that is used to automatically provide the ICD-10 codes. So here we are looking at mapping with SNOMED concepts and LOINC concepts and RX norm ontologies and building out clinical information models that help us identify when there's clinical opportunities. These evidence sheets are activated within the 360 Encompass CDI application and have priority factors associated with them when they are in an opportunity status. These evidence sheets can be in a status of opportunity undocumented. We also want to show you when we find all the clinical evidence that fully supports a clinical finding and it's documented to its highest level. When things are in an opportunity status, it means there is additional documentation needed, and these might lead to a query. So we do have priority factor scores that are associated with these clinical evidence sheets when they are in that opportunity status. The CDI specialist can review these opportunity evidence sheets and either send a linked query requesting the additional documentation or mark the opportunity as not applicable. Doing either of those two actions takes the points away from the priority score and addresses it on the list. So it's very important to us that these clinical evidence sheets are actionable for the priority factor scoring. We want to make sure that these are points that can kind of be resolved either through sending a query or marking as not applicable, or the evidence sheets can naturally resolve when they change to a documented status as the length of stay goes on. So those are some of the big use cases for them within 360 Encompass CDI.
I know we'll have more questions about that, but the next question I think is one that a lot of people in our field are concerned about. I think we like technology until we think it's going to take over our job, right? So how do you see productivity measures changing with the incorporation of AI technologies?
I think what we're really looking at is how we can extend the efficiencies of users by incorporating AI technologies. I would love to have like 20 more people on our team to help out with things, and I think everybody on this call would probably feel the same way. But we know we have a limited bandwidth and workforce to work with. So we need to utilize these technologies to get the most out of our productivity. Through prioritization, we look to get users into cases that are the best use of their time. And then with CDI Engage One and the evidence sheets leading to linked queries, we help to expedite the query creation process by automatically pulling out the clinical indicators and putting them in the query template for the users. Saving time, counting clicks, things like that really help drive that productivity, and they're things that AI can really help automate. Through the clinical evidence sheets, the system is automatically helping to find the clinical documentation opportunities. With all of these advances, we look to see that users can maintain accessing the same amount or potentially less cases, like Hannah was saying, but have a higher impact on the cases that they are accessing. So we look at a lot of the reports in enterprise analytics and maybe want to see the trend for reviews staying the same or even going down, but then trend lines for impacts going up.
Yeah.
We really want to see these higher KPI impacts across the board with the workforce we have. So it's really important that we can use a lot of the automation in the application to help us get there. I think when any of us talk to you about maybe features we can work on in the application to enhance it, we think of how can things be automated. We don't want to put more items that you have to do on your plate, more buttons to click, another workflow setting to do. We want to see, okay, how can we solve this problem in an automated fashion that we can make you more productive with the little time and resources that you do have.
Yeah. I think, if you're listening to this so far, you're hearing things like meaningful work, right? I mean, I think that's where is the thread of one of the key things that we're going to talk about today: meaningful work, efficiencies. The next question from our group is really about accuracy. And we do have a question in the group, in the group chat, where I see that somebody, says that our system picked up Dr. Hodgkin's as Hodgkin's lymphoma, which we know internally that's a tuning issue, right? So we need to address that. But when we talk about our accuracy of our evidence sheets, how is this measured, and how would we go about addressing a Dr. Hodgkin's?
Yeah, and I'll speak specifically from the CDI Engage 1 natural language understanding point of view. It's a little different for the computer-assisted coding, but for the natural language understanding evidence sheets, each evidence sheet has different clinical factors and indicators that it's examining the inpatient record for. For some of these clinical indicators, the rules may have built-in cases to require multiple mentions of a particular piece of evidence to ensure the evidence is there consistently. And also, if one of those mentions is a fluke, it helps us have the supporting necessity that you have to have multiple mentions of it. This helps with the accuracy of the evidence sheets. In enterprise analytics, where we get a lot of reporting out about the evidence sheets, we look into how frequently the evidence sheets are being linked to queries, which shows us how these end up translating to actual query opportunities. We take a look at, out of all of the evidence sheets that were surfaced, what percentage had a query, and then we look at the inverse, with out of all the queries that were sent, what percentage were linked to evidence sheets. We're frequently finding that we're surfacing a lot more opportunities than that are linked to evidence sheets, but out of all the queries that are sent, a lot of them are linked to the evidence sheets. So that's a really good indicator that it is working well for that organization when we can see, out of all the queries that were sent, 70% of those were linked to evidence sheets. That's showing that we're on the mark there. The inverse, though, may be that out of all the opportunities we're surfacing, 50% of those are linked to evidence sheets. So we have to look at it both ways. We also look at how frequently the evidence sheets are marked not applicable. We have 4 categories of not applicable, and this helps us drill into when is it being marked not applicable because there was an issue with the accuracy, versus when are they being marked as not applicable because it is not a pertinent query opportunity for this particular encounter. So we really dig into these examples to kind of analyze what's going on with the natural language understanding. On the engagement side, we have a great content organization, and each customer is partnered with a content coach to help investigate these reports that we're getting out, and also do a lot of the tuning of the natural language understanding at the implementation. We try to learn things like common names, disclaimers are a really important one, and we build what we call a custom import engine that tunes the engine directly to your organization's documentation. So these are all ways that we help to get and produce a higher accuracy evidence sheet, but we're consistently looking over and measuring and seeing how is it performing, and is it continue to performing over time. We may see that we want to tighten some of the criteria that the evidence sheet is looking for, and that can help increase the accuracy because we're not casting as wide of a net for what we're looking for. So there's a lot of refining that we do, and we also have best practice too, that upon go live, we shouldn't be going live with too many evidence sheets because we don't want to overwhelm the end users. I think our best practice for go live right now is up to 12 clinical evidence sheets, and then you can consider adding 3 to 5 additional evidence sheets every 30 days after that go live if you want to build up to a larger amount. But this is really helping the end users understand exactly what the evidence sheets are looking for and feel that ownership over them, that they understand the criteria. And that really helps with not having so many marked as not applicable. It just might not be not applicable on this particular encounter case. So those are some of the ways that we really look to improve the accuracy of them.
So the next question is around a specific type of evidence sheet. And just want to clarify again that we're talking about CDI Engage 1 evidence sheets, and that is the product that has these evidence sheets. So unless your organization has CDI Engage 1, they will not have these evidence sheets. So this question is, what are the specific labs you look at to define and query for pancytopenia?
So I did look up in our content library, which we have very robust documentation for our clients utilizing CDI Engage 1. And we have quite a few pancytopenia rules available. And I looked at the one where we are looking for clinical evidence of pancytopenia, and it has not yet been documented. So I found the specific lab criteria that we look for, and I'm just going to share it with the group. We look for white blood cell count less than 4,000, neutrophils less than 1,500, platelets less than 150,000. And then for men, we look at a hemoglobin less than 13. And then for non-pregnant females, we look at a hemoglobin less than 12. So those are all lab indicators that the engine is examining the lab feed or documentation of the labs and narrative notes. We're finding these indicators, and we're not requiring all of them. You could, for your organization, make that multiples of those required, but those are all the labs that we reason over to help identify that this is potentially a case that might be surfaced for a pancytopenia opportunity.
Great. Thank you. That was a really specific question.
Yeah, I had to do my homework before that, but gave me a good plug for our content documentation.
Yes. And, that's, obviously pancytopenia, very common, something that we would query and we want to have. And if you're, talking about efficiencies, looking for the information for us, telling us what was found, and also telling us what they didn't find related to some of these clinical conditions. So let's talk about that. How does our artificial intelligence work? Do evidence sheets typically pull in historical data that is not part of the current admission?
So they do not. For our inpatient Encompass CDI clinical evidence sheets, we look at documentation that is within the bounds of the encounter from admit to discharge. So I do know there is documentation for a Hema Actus out there about using evidences outside of those bounds in some cases, but for this specifically, we do have it tuned to just look at documentation from within the current encounter. So we use a lot of those encounter identifiers to determine that. And then we pull the evidence that has surfaced from that hospitalization.
Including if the provider has pulled in information like a prior chest x-ray, ejection fraction, those kind of things. If they have entered it into the note, then we will reason over that.
Correct. Yeah, thanks for that clarification.
So another question, So another question is, do I still have to manually gather information from the medication lists, MAR, and the flow sheets, vital signs?
So I'll use this as an opportunity to go through the document sources that we do use for CDI Engage 1, because I want to be very specific about that. So when we are reasoning over the bounds of this encounter documentation for the CDI Engage 1 evidence sheets, we utilize a lot of the traditional inpatient documentation like admit H&Ps, progress notes, discharge summaries, et cetera. So we kind of refer to those as HIM documents. So the kind of narrative notes that your care team is creating while they're in the hospitalization. Additionally, we bring in the structured lab feed for lab results. So sometimes providers will put lab results in those narrative notes, but we do not rely on them putting that over. We do bring in the structured lab feed from the encounter as well, and that is a very rich source of evidence that we can automatically pull evidence from. We also bring in the radiology documentation feed. So that's a really helpful place for supplemental evidence as well. We understand these document sources. So if we know that pneumonia is only documented on a radiology report, that is used kind of as a supplemental diagnosis of pneumonia. And we look for the pneumonia to come from a progress note or a different document as well. But that's really helpful with chest x-rays, like Kathy said, and pulling evidence from there. We're really excited. We just started bringing in a medication administration feed. So this is actually a subset of the whole MAR feed because that also includes the orders. We wanted to use specifically for CDI evidence the administration evidences. So we are betaing this right now and looking at the results, and we're really excited about how this is giving us an additional documentation source to find evidences of treatment for these clinical factors through the CDI Engage 1 evidence sheets, and we're expanding and rolling that out further and further. So that is our newest source, is that medication administration feed. I do want to be clear, we are not bringing in nursing flow sheets to use at this point, kind of given the template and some of the structure of those, it's a little tricky, and we are not yet using the vital sign feed either. So if we are needing to use specific vital sign evidences, we look for those to be mentioned in some of the note types that we are reasoning over as evidence. But we're always looking to extend our model and add in more factors for the evidence sheets, but right now we are not using the nursing flow sheets or the vital signs feed.
Right. So I mentioned earlier tuning. And the next question is, what is customizable?
Yeah, so this is a place that I think we've gotten really great validation from our end users about our approach. Like I said, we have a tremendous content documentation library that shows all our out-of-the-box content as our team has created it, and that is based on all the latest standards and coding clinics. We're constantly updating those rules, making sure they're in line with what is out in the literature, but we make it very visible with exactly how those rules function. So we break out the different components the rules are looking for, how they fire, and what makes them documented or sitting in that opportunity status. We also work with the customers to customize that. So if your organization said, hey, we really have this great definition for sepsis, we have about, I think, 20 different sepsis rules available, but you guys could also customize one to align exactly with your organization's criteria. So it's really nice that we have kind of this visibility on how the rules are firing. That really helps with the compliance of these as well. I think we see a lot more ownership, especially when the physicians start using these as automatic real-time nudges. Our first phase of implementation is that they're used as evidence sheets for the CDI specialists in 360 Encompass, but eventually our third phase of implementation is they're used as automated nudges for the physician. And when the physicians and the CDI teams have buy-in exactly how these rules are firing, we see really great adoption of the tools. So it's been nice, you know, as we roll this out with some organizations, they kind of have their working committees that really have this ownership. They know how these rules work. They've asked for these little tweaks where maybe we've changed the lab value. We've required multiple mentions. We want the lab value only to come from the lab feed and not use the narrative note lab values. Those are all available customizations and more. We have a very robust clinical library at this point, but we're also always willing to build new rules for our clients too. So if there's something that is a really important thing for your organization, we can create a content rule if it's not part of our library as well. So we've taken a very open-ended approach to working with our customers and understanding how the rules work. And I think that's really benefited us with the adoption of the technology because it helps the organizations feel ownership over what the CDI specialists and physicians are seeing.
Want to give a shout out to our solution advisors who work with this product and help do some of the things Caitlin is talking about there, you know, and I know Caitlin, you work with them very closely. Yeah. Well, thanks, Caitlin. Stay tuned. I think there's some questions in the chat that you might have to circle back with us. But now we're going to move forward and talk some things about 360 Encompass workflows. Sean Dickinson, who's the product manager, has joined us today to discuss that. So Sean, can you introduce yourself? And the first question that you have from our group is, when in the workflow do I use automatic impact?
Hi, so thanks, Kathy, and good afternoon, morning, maybe to some. My name is Sean Dickinson, and I am an inpatient CDI product manager for Clinician Solutions as well. So basically like Caitlin. So the question was about automatic impact and when do you use that in a workflow? And just short answer is during your query process, and also now for your non-provider interactions. For those who have taken the most recent release and is using that feature, those are the two areas where you would use automatic impact. So the longer question or answer is, what is automatic impact? And for those that are using queries or writing queries and looking at the outcomes and reporting, you know that there are two ways that you can show the outcome or the impact of your queries within the 360 Encompass product. And one of them is being our legacy workflow, where where you would go in, you will assign a baseline DRG, you would add your primary and secondary grouper impacts to your query once you get that provider response, and then you do some form of reconciliation utilizing a report or a specific work list within 360 to calculate the outcomes. And you would have to look at data reports in order to see all the levels of your query impact. We improved that process by creating automatic impact. And with automatic impact, we take the burden out of having to rely on reporting structures and creating a baseline DRG to get your outcome of your query impact. And we've also moved a lot of that information that you found in the reports to the front end within 360. So there are two parts of automatic impact. You have your final cumulative automatic impact, which is like taking all of your queries and the impacts and comparing it to the final code set to show that final cumulative impact of all of your agreed and documented queries. So not just financial, but your quality impacts, your profiling impacts, as well as your financial impacts from your queries. While a user, CDI, concurrent coder, HIM professional, are writing queries, we also have something that's incremental impact, which will show a snapshot in time for that query. So when you're writing a query. So that is, in a nutshell, what automatic impact is. It's a functionality used to show the total outcome or impact of all queries written on a case and reduce that burden of manually doing a lot of steps to get that final impact.
So Sean, the next question is there a charge to add automatic impact if they're not currently using it or have it?
No, there's no charge for automatic impact. It's part of the 360 Encompass product. Those that are converting or moving from legacy impact, like I described earlier, and to automatic impact, we would recommend that you reach out to Solventum to work with your CSE, your client success executive or solution advisor, or work with support on the setup. You can turn it on within 360, but we do recommend that you work with Solventum because there are certain elements that we would like to make sure is set up correctly, like your payer, financial class, LV tables, and there's certain maintenance tasks that we want to make sure that the grouper information used to calculate those impacts stay fresh and is accurate. So when you're looking at those outcomes, it is the most accurate estimated outcomes for those cases. But there is no financial cost with moving to automatic impact when you're legacy. And those who are implementing 360 now, you will be implemented with automatic impact.
Perfect. Another question about automatic impact is, can I add all of my incremental impact totals to equal the final cumulative impact?
So the incremental impact, like I said in the previous question, is a part of the automatic impact process. And for incremental impact, it's, like I said, it's a snapshot. So if I'm a user writing a query, I can see in real time what the estimated impact is for this query. Now, this incremental impact does not mean that it's going to be the exact match of your final cumulative, because our final cumulative utilizes the final coded code set from HIM and compare it with all of the other queries on the case. But for that one query that you're writing, it takes a snapshot in time when you write that query using things such as your anticipated result, what you're expecting the provider to say. And once you have that result from the provider, that diagnosis or procedure or POA indicator, that clarification, it utilizes an actual result. And but like I said, it is a snapshot in time. So if I have multiple queries, there are multiple incremental impacts where we see the potential outcome. So if you were to add those up together, we do not expect the final cumulative to exactly match. So you may see a varying range of dollars or quality impact that you may see when compared to the final cumulative. So it's not recommended that you add them up. There may be some instances, if you have one query, for instance, and you had a very good code set coming in, it wasn't a difficult case. You had a code set when you created the query. The final code set matches yours. Then you may see a similar outcome. But to say that you can add them up to get the final impact, it's not recommended, and it's not likely that you would get the final outcome of that case, the financial quality and profile.
Okay. The next question is, what's the best way to identify risk adjustment diagnoses within the product?
So there's a couple of ways in 360 that you can identify risk-adjusted diagnoses within the product. We have our severity, illness, risk, and mortality, which is risk-adjusted, and in CRS that is clearly flagged. If it's impacting, you can see the subclasses and the level for each one of those diagnoses. There's also your HCCs that are identified within the 360 product. And the HCC details, AHRQ for your PSIs, your IQIs, et cetera. That is a risk-adjusted methodology as well. That's embedded within our software. So in CRS, you are able to see PSIs that are the inclusions, the exclusions, how that works within your code set. And there's also Elix-Hauser methodology that is embedded as well. So you can see the measures, the variables, and how they impact the case as well. And all of that is, there's reporting pieces within CRS that can give you visit level details related to those. There's information that's embedded in CRS in the view as you're adding or removing or modifying codes within CRS that gives you a lot of details around those conditions that may qualify as a risk-adjusted diagnosis.
Great. Well, we're going to switch to another really popular feature. We have a question around advanced code sequencing, and the person wants to know, can the logic be customized?
So with advanced code sequencing, for those who use it and like a refresher of what it is, or maybe this is your first time hearing anything about it, it is a feature within our CRS, our encoder or our coding and reimbursement software that will generate a code set that attempts to accurately reflect the patient's care. And by bringing in diagnoses that are commonly overlooked in final coding, which are your quality indicators. So I just spoke about PSIs and Elix-Hauser and HCCs, those risk-adjusted methodologies and conditions. So with advanced code sequencing, it's looking beyond that MCC, CC, that financial aspect of your sequencing, and incorporating or lifting up diagnoses that also have that quality impact. Because we know that CMS only takes top 25 diagnoses, and a lot of organizations have shifted from financial to quality, a mixture of both. Some have just focused primarily on quality and expect the financial dollars to come behind by working on quality. So we needed to make sure that that quality component was represented within the top 25. So the logic, well, there's a hierarchy, and it looks at a lot of different factors and determining which quality measures are listed within the top 25. So that logic is set. If you don't use advanced code sequencing, just as an FYI, if you don't use advanced code sequencing, there is already in CRS a legacy logic, I will call it, where there is some sequencing logic with MCCs and CCs. But the advanced code sequencing, again, expands on that and introduces quality within the top 25 as well. So as far as customization, there isn't any site customization specifically for advanced code sequencing.
Okay. The other question was around this is how are facility sort codes prioritized with the sequencing? And I think you just answered it, but I'll let you.
Well, yeah, it's similar. Facility sort or custom sort, yeah, it's a similar thing. So before there was a code sequencing, there was facility sort. There was a way for organizations to say, hey, I have certain diagnoses that I want to make sure are represented in the top 25. So CRS gives the ability to put up to 50 diagnoses that an organization feels that are very important. We will sometimes utilize that for like your palliative care, your DNR codes, sometimes your SDOH code. So we utilize that, and they were able to make sure that was the top 25. So advanced code sequencing works with that. So there's always going to be a spot for facility sort and a place for advanced code sequencing that works along with it. I'll just add with facility sort and advanced code sequencing, though, there's limited real estate. We only have 25 diagnoses that we're working with here. So the number of facility sort codes or custom sort codes that you're adding, for every one that you add, if let's say five of those diagnoses that you put in facility sort actually shows up on a visit, those 5 diagnoses will be definitely within your top 25. So that reduces the real estate, the remaining factors or diagnosis spots that are there, because we have our principal diagnosis spot. So advanced code sequencing may not move all of those quality indicators that you would expect within the top 25 because we have limited the remaining spaces for future facility sort. So we recommend that you review your process with facility sort and advanced code sequencing and adjust accordingly. And there's also custom edits or actionable edits within CRS that can be utilized as well.
So your last question before we look at some of the live questions, and so please, if you do have questions, now's the time, put them in there. The last question for you, Sean, that came from our group is, or from our customers is, if I manually change the orders of codes and complete a visit, will they be the same? Will they be in the same order if they go back into the visit?
For CRS, no. And this is advanced code sequencing or the custom or legacy sequencing is the same. There's no memory for CRS, so you have the autonomy to change codes while you're in that visit. You can when you complete that visit, that code set, the way you have sequenced your secondary diagnoses will remain for that encounter, that visit at that time. So it will go back to your abstractor that way. But if someone comes back in to that final code set into CRS, the system will automatically shift back to the legacy logic that has been predefined. So your legacy logic or your advanced code sequencing logic. So it will shift back so it doesn't stick when you do those manual shifts with CRS.
Okay. Well, like we said, these were questions that were submitted in advance from our viewers or our registered people who registered for the webinar today, and we thank you for such great questions. We actually have the right people scheduled today to take on your questions, so this is good. Lisa, who started our conversation today, is here, and she's going to come back and review some of the questions that were submitted, and I think she's got a few that our group can do. So, Lisa?
Sure. Yep. Hey, and great conversation. And like you said, we have the right people on today to answer your
Yeah.
questions. There was a lot of detailed information. It's just so impressive to hear this team talk. So thank you all for your time today. One question I do want to answer is I can answer this. Is this session being recorded? It is being recorded. Right now, just be patient with us. We are transitioning over to our new Solventum website, which is very exciting, but obviously a very large undertaking. So normally this would be on our website in a couple weeks, but it will be on our website as soon as possible. As like I said, we are transitioning over to our new website, and this will be on that new site. So hopefully in the next month it will be, because I agree this webinar was very helpful. So I'm sure there's a lot of you that want to go back and listen in. All right, so looking at our questions, from Susan, how is a 1-day length of stay a better source of opportunity when there are so few notes available and the case does not repopulate? And I'm going to pass that to Hannah. Oh, Hannah, you might be on mute.
Yep, Hannah, we can't hear you.
Yep. Thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
There we go. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's a good question, and it kind of ties into what we were talking about before. It ties in really where it's important that your organization adjusts the scores for the kinds of things that are important to your team members and are important for reviews and are key for reviews to occur on. So when we talk about there being multiple factors, we actually have a way to actually have different scores for new cases, concurrent cases, and discharge cases for the exact same factors. So you can adjust the scores to actually have the cases for those specific factors. If it needs a re-review, it will come back if the scores are adjusted as such. And specifically regarding a 1-day stay, 1-day length of stay with no documentation, we do have like new cases. There is a factor actually specifically for one example would be a history and physical. So you actually can score that history and physical for new cases higher for new cases than you would for concurrent or discharged. And that way that ensures that the new cases that you're spending time reviewing are cases that have some documentation that's meaningful. So you would really want to adjust those scores to enable the cases that, again, that are important to your organization to, first of all, populate from a new perspective in order of what is valuable to review. We certainly wouldn't promote reviewing a new case that has no documentation on it to create an impactful review. And we would certainly want, a concurrent case to come up higher on a list that has an opportunity for review versus the new case that has no opportunities. So we would adjust those scores to actually address that specific question and that specific issue that may be occurring.
All right, thank you. The next question we have is from Sarah. Where do we find, going back to those evidence sheets, where do we find those? And I'm going to send that to Caitlin.
Sure. So if your organization has licensed CDI Engage 1 with the evidence sheets, they're found in a couple different areas of the 360E CDI workflow. The first place that the evidence sheet potential conditions are shown is on the CDI priority work list in the potential conditions column. From there, you can use the work list expander and see how the evidence sheets have contributed to the priority score from that case. Once you access in that encounter, on the Home tab, there is a potential conditions column that shows the evidence sheets, their status, whether they're an opportunity or documented, the date that they were identified, and if a provider was nudged along with the evidence sheets. So these evidence sheets are the same rationale as the provider nudges if that piece has been enabled. So we do get the feedback that if a provider has been nudged with the evidence as well. Once a user clicks on that evidence sheet from that tile on the Home tab, in 360,